Hello, fellow nerds, geeks, and supporters of indie pop culture creators. Aaron Nabus here, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of The Hall H Show. On this episode, I'll be talking to Stephanie Cooke, an award-winning writer and editor based out of Toronto, Canada. She loves comic books, video games, movies, puns, and her snuggly cat that she's unfortunately terribly allergic to. Her writing has been featured in Mark Millar's Millarworld Annual, Wayward Sisters, The Secret Loves of Geek Girls, Toronto Comics Anthology, and more. She currently has 2 children's graphic novels out now from HMH Kids. Her debut, Oh My Gods, and ParaNorthern, which just recently came out. A sequel to Oh My Gods is scheduled to be released in January of 2022. And she also has her own podcast about cinematic heists, capers, stings, and more, called The Capercast, that she co-hosts with Whitney Gardner. Stephanie, welcome to the Hall H Show.
Thank you so much for having me. What an intro.
Yeah, it's good to, hear your voice because, now that we've been in the pandemic for a little while, it's, a lot of us are missing that human contact. So I guess, this is better than nothing, right?
Yeah, it's nice. I live alone and I haven't really I've only recently started to kind of see people again now that I'm double vaccinated.
Me too.
Vaccinated. Yeah. And I'm slowly doing things mostly just outside. I haven't ventured indoors to anything yet. But, I am so just starved for socialization. And doing podcasts has been a really fun way to still connect with people and talk about nerdy stuff and fun stuff and stuff that, I just enjoy talking about with people. So, yeah.
Cool. Since this is your first time on the show, can you tell us a little bit about your origin story? Where did you grow up? And speaking about nerdy things, what was 13-year-old Stephanie like? What kind of books, TV shows, movies, and video games had the most impact on you as a teen?
Wow. That's so much stuff. Okay. So I grew up in rural Canada. I technically was from Toronto. A lot of my family is here, but my parents decided that it wasn't any place to raise a young kid. So we moved out to the country and I grew up in the middle of nowhere, more or less. So there really wasn't a lot going on there. My parents were very big go play outside people. I didn't have a TV really. We had a TV, but my mom would lock it in our garage so that I would go play outside and do other things. And they would only really take it out for things like TGIF and, programming that we could watch together as a family. So I guess that ties into what I enjoyed growing up. It was big, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Boy Meets World, all those kind of things around that 13-year-old age. And I started with comics, with Archie comics, because we didn't really have comic stores. So the Archie digests were the thing that my mom would get me if I was good when we went to the grocery store, because we had a long trip to and from the grocery store. It was in the next town over. So I would have this and just sit in the back of the car, quiet and content, and just read. My small town basically had a post office, a convenience store, and a library. It was a really weird mishmash of things. So I spent a lot of time at the library reading things and just consuming stuff there. I was a big fan of Tamora Pierce, her books, The Song of the Lioness kind of things. And I really, really enjoyed Diana Wynne Jones, who you probably know the name from Howl's Moving Castle. The there was this series called The Enchanted Forest Chronicles that I loved, and The Golden Compass was a big, big, big thing for me. I basically just like loved escapism, like human urban fantasy kind of stories that took you somewhere else, where it's just like, oh wow, we found this portal to another world, like wow, this is cool. And that was like a really big thing because I just wanted to kind of escape my small town.
All right. Literally.
Yeah, so like that was very much what I was drawn to. And then I would go to my friends' places because we weren't allowed to I wasn't allowed to have video games.
Mm-hmm.
My mom thought that, like, you know, I'd played them too much. She was definitely right. And so I would go to like my various friends' houses and play, you know, Super Nintendo or N64 or whatever with them, and just, you know, be like, yeah, I'm going over here and I won't be back for several hours. In fact, maybe I'll stay overnight and play late into. So,
wow.
Yeah.
I love the Super Nintendo and N64.
So good.
Now I want to play Mario Kart all day now, if I had one.
So good. I was like very addicted to like Super Mario, and then I also had this like weird obsession when I would go to visit my aunt with playing Star Fox. I really liked Star Fox for a while. On the Super Nintendo specifically, and obviously Donkey Kong too. Like Donkey Kong was a classic, and I remember going over to my aunt's, and I'd be there for like a weekend, and I'd leave and my thumbs were just like red and sore because like all I did was just, you know, play all weekend.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about Super Nintendo and even the first PlayStation, when I was in college, me and a friend of mine opened up a little store where we sold like Japanese imported video games. So you know, there was all these titles from overseas that never made it over here. So that was a fun time.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I think the first console that I ever owned myself, like by the time I had a job and was able to kind of, you know, pay my own stuff, was the PS2.
Mm.
So I kind of missed out on the PS1. I played a little bit of it, but the PS2 was where I really started to be like, all right, we're going to have like self-sufficient gamer setup at home. So
Right. I remember after we'd close, we'd shut off all the lights and then invite all our friends over, and then we had a big screen TV, and then we'd play like Resident Evil the whole night.
oh my gosh. Yeah. We so I don't know if you played Fatal Frame at all.
No.
Oh my gosh. So I never played Resident Evil, but Fatal Frame was like the scary game equivalent, I guess, for me. And it was just like you played as like a Japanese person, and you were going around like in these creepy Japanese ghost towns, and you were fighting ghosts with cameras. So like if you take a photo, you capture the spirit, but that means you have to have this like super close up, you know, view in this camera, and then these terrifying Japanese ghosts would pop out at you. And I would always play this at my friend Carrie's house. And Carrie didn't want to play, and she thought it was funny to watch me because I'm actually like a huge wimp when it comes to horror. But I remember this ghost popped out of this like antique chest one time. It was like a jump scare moment. And I threw the controller and it hit her. And she was like, all right, no more. This game is banned.
Oh my gosh.
No more. So.
Wow.
Yeah. I am not good with horror games at all.
When did you realize that you were artistic, and what attracted you to specifically to writing?
Oh, I think I've always loved writing. You know, like I remember writing little stories when I was young. Like I remember being like, I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And my parents were really supportive of me being artistic. Like my mom really loves the arts. My mom loves doing artsy things. And so they were really like, they embraced that side of me. But I think somewhere along the way, you know, teachers, other students, other people just kind of like wear you down in that you can't really make a future out of this, right? So I started kind of pursuing other things that I felt I could make a career out of. But writing was something that I felt really was a part of me early on. You know, again, I read a lot, like a lot. and writing my own stories was a natural like next step for me. Again, I'm an only child. I grew up in the middle of nowhere. So I was like a little bit weird when I was like by myself at home. Like my parents worked late. Like I was alone so often. And a side effect of that is kind of talking to yourself so that you have another voice around or like you can hear something, like the silence is just otherwise eerie. And so I would like tell stories to myself. Like I would make stories up and just kind of run around my house being like, inventing these worlds around me. And so in a way, I feel like I've always kind of been doing that. Like that's always been a huge part of my life, which sounds super cliche, I think sometimes, but it was just kind of how I got through being really lonely as a kid.
And specifically, what drew you to sequential storytelling, and why is creating comic books and graphic novels important to you?
Yeah. So I think I've tried to write prose before. I've actually written, it's not published. Like I've just written it. It's still in limbo. I've written like a novel, like a YA thing. And it was really daunting, like it's I have ADHD and kind of sitting down to tell stories in this super dense capacity, describing everything and stuff when my mind is going a million miles a minute is hard for me. And I really love to read prose. I would love to make my way back to prose someday. But I was also a huge fan of comics and graphic novels. And I've just been reading them for so, so long. And originally, like I didn't have any plans to write graphic novels and comics. But I have been in the industry for about a decade now, and I kind of networked and made friends with a lot of people along the way. And about maybe 5 or 6 years into me being a part of the industry through, I was a reviewer and a podcaster, and I did like articles and um, critiquing and all this other stuff. And someone came up to me and was like, "Oh, are you a writer?" And I was like, "No, like I write, articles and reviews and all this, but like I don't really write comics." And they were like, "But you know everybody. Why don't you write comics?" And they were kind of like, "You would be silly to not write comics." And then they just like disappeared. And I don't really think that they understand that the impact that had on me, because I didn't have an answer to why I didn't write comics, like I loved the medium. I knew people, I knew how it worked. So I started kind of practicing and honing my voice and kind of figuring out if it was something that, I would enjoy doing. I'd always kind of been like, oh, well, I'll write articles or eventually I'll write novels and prose. And the more I started playing around with comics and scripting, the more I just fell in love with it and was like, oh my gosh, this is the medium for me. This is it. I'm like extremely visual too. So I was able to, see the page kind of unfold as I was writing it. And I found it a really fluid way to tell stories and get things down on the paper that was conducive to how my brain functions and just, spits out a million ideas at once. And I could just be like, blah, 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 blah. Like it's been amazing to discover that and find my place in it.
Wow. Um, Now you mentioned, the whole networking thing. Has that been easy for you to do?
I think a little bit yes and a little bit no. So I'm an introverted extrovert for sure. Like it takes me a lot of energy to work up to being like, okay, I'm going to go out. I'm going to go do something. It's going to be great. And then I'm anxious about it. If I'm like the first person there, I'm like, oh, maybe I should just go home. Oh, but then once I'm like to people, I am like a natural like storyteller, and I love connecting with people and just being like, oh, like chatterbox like this. I love to talk. Um, so it's a little bit of like a yes and a no because there's that component. And then, but like when meeting someone new, I'm really anxious. And it's like, I feel like I have weird anxiety driven nervous tics that always develop and they always change. And I'm like, what's it gonna be this month? Like finger guns, or there was like weird lunging for a while where my body was just like involuntarily lunging and being like, hello. It's a mixed bag. But I think just kind of like going to conventions and talking to people and really connecting with others because of my love of the craft and what they're doing just made for like natural conversation. And I'd been doing social media kind of through writing articles and stuff. I wrote for like a movie entertainment website. So I was really starting to utilize that more in my everyday. So then you'd go from like the convention to online and be like, oh my gosh, it was really great to connect with you. You know, like really loved your art, really loved what you were all about. Like, wow, you know, hope to see you at another show. And I don't know, like that's kind of, I think, the start of the building that independently. But it's hard to kind of put yourself out there sometimes. It's hard to know what to say. And then sometimes other people are socially anxious and there's like those awkward silent pauses and you're like, oh God, they hate me. And you want to just like crawl under a table and hide. But yeah, I think networking is a really daunting step for a lot of people in the industry, but it's also one of the most important parts when you're kind of like breaking in and trying to find a place, because you really need your peers and you need people who understand what you're going through.
Yeah, I think so too. I think from my, like, you know, I always thought that, you know, when people take criticism from other people, you know, there's people who handle it not as well as others, but I think for the most part, the only criticism that really matters are from your peers, I think.
Yeah, I agree. You know, it's hard not to take things to heart sometimes. I've had to learn to like not Google like reviews or go on Goodreads or whatever because like, you know, those aren't for me necessarily, you know, you, they're for consumers and other readers and all that stuff. Like they're not necessarily made with critiquing the creators in mind, right? But your peers are there to like give you some tough love sometimes, depending on what you kind of need, and to be your support system.
Mm-hmm.
And I have, it's taken me a long time, I think, to start kind of like opening up to my like peer network a little bit more and share what I'm working on and that sort of thing. But the advice they give you is so invaluable, and it's helped me become a better creator. And there's just sometimes that before you send things off to your agent or an editor or whatever, you pass it off to someone else and they're just like, but like, why is this? And you're like, oh my God, but why is that? And yeah, you know, it's so important to have those people there to kind of keep you honest and to be there with you.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned anxiety earlier. How do you personally handle anxiety?
It's a bit of a struggle sometimes. You know, when I would go to conventions, there's been a lot of talk about this online over the years, the BarCon aspect, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think for a really long time, I was really falling prey to that.
I guess before we go on, maybe for our audience who may not know, you know, what is BarCon exactly?
Right. Sorry, I just kind of jumped ahead. But yeah, BarCon is kind of the con after the con. You know, they say the kind of networking and the connection forming, that sort of thing, really happens at the main bar, which is usually like the convention hotel bar. Happens after the show, when everyone's just kind of winding down and, trying to relax after being on the show floor. So it's usually a lot of like fellow pros and peers and artists and writers, editors, publishers, etc. But there are occasional fans in there and that sort of thing. But people tend to drink and obviously hang out and laugh and all of that stuff. So that's kind of what people mean when they say BarCon. It's the drinking component after everybody finishes up the show for the day. Does that sum it up?
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so I think I felt really susceptible to, there's so many new people. There's so many intimidating people there. Sometimes there's like celebrities at these things too. And not just like comic celebrities, like actual celebrities. And that sounds really mean. I didn't mean it to sound that way. Like movie and TV celebrities, not actual celebrities. But anyways, so I don't know, people like editors and publishers, they can write off their tabs. So it's like really prevalent to be handed a drink. And like, if you're close to being finished, somebody's like, oh, I'll get the next round, because they can just keep the receipt and write it off. So the drinks just keep flowing. And when I'm anxious, you want to do something with like your hands or feet. Like, I'm a fiddler. So it's like, oh, well, I have this drink. I guess my equivalent of that is going to be just take a sip. But then before you know it, that drink's gone. And then the next drink's gone. And then it's just this cycle, right? Where you're anxious, you take a drink. And so I quit drinking a few years back because I was realizing that was becoming a bit of a crutch for me. And I didn't want that to be the case anymore. I didn't want to keep handling my anxiety in a really unhealthy way. So now it's kind of just like breathing and trying to kind of, find at least one person that I know to kind of gravitate towards and at least start a conversation with and ease my way into those kind of things. But that's not really, I suppose, a long-term way to kind of manage the anxiety. I have, over the last few months, been doing therapy, though, to work through some of my anxiety and to manage it in a better way, besides, again, alcohol. And just kind of like refocusing my mind and being like, this person probably doesn't hate you. Your mind is tricking you. Like, just be yourself and it's going to be fine. But again, my anxiety also manifests in like weird, like awkward tics, like body tics. Like my body just does things, again, like finger guns, or sometimes I would like squish my face in and be like, hello, how are you? And like, it's just, I can't stop my body from doing that. It just does what it does. But yeah. I don't really think that was an answer. I don't have an answer for this.
That's okay.
But
You don't have to have an answer. I mean, nothing's definitive, right? I mean, we all go through the process of life, day by day, with incremental changes, hopefully for the better.
Exactly. I think therapy is the healthiest part of dealing with my anxiety, and finding coping mechanisms that work for me is the biggest realist answer there.
How have you been able to cope, I guess, creatively during the pandemic? I mean, how have your, I guess your projects, how have you been staying creative? Has there been any substantial lulls in activity?
Yes and no. So kind of addressing the first part of that question, when the pandemic first started, I was doing my day job, and like a full-time gig, and we went into work from home mode in March of last year, like a lot of people did. Soon after that, I sold my first YA book, graphic novel. I think that was in like April or May. And I didn't, like, I'm a big outliner. Like I have a skeleton of what I want to work on pretty well done by the time we go to, pitch a book and then hopefully have it picked up. And then kind of converting that skeleton of an outline into a script is usually a pretty, not easy, but it's, relatively straightforward because I've already done the legwork. But even that was really hard for me last year. Pillow Talk is the book we sold. It was announced, I believe, in November or December last year. And it was just really long and hard to kind of get everything down on paper. I think the notes editing, like the edits are the hardest part for me, especially like the first draft edits. It's so difficult because you always get so many notes. And this was also the most amount of notes that I've ever gotten, because like you could tell that my thinking was a little disjointed and it just wasn't coming as naturally for me as some of my other projects. So I really struggled with that as I was trying to adapt to work from home. I usually would write at like a cafe, or in Toronto, we have the big reference library here where the TCAF happens. It's a really big comics arts festival, the Toronto Comics Arts Festival. And I love to write there. And those were kind of my go-to places. And all of that was closed down. And I had to learn to do all of my writing at home. And I had to find ways to kind of, trick myself into having work modes and not work modes, getting dressed and then like getting changed into pajamas still, even though I'm not going anywhere, making sure that you have like clothes on and you're putting like, your hair kind of together, and like these like things that kind of put you in like shifting gears. But yeah, it was really hard to do that book. I'm really happy with how it turned out, and eventually I kind of found a rhythm, thank God. But like getting into it at the beginning of the pandemic when we really didn't know how long work from home was going to happen, and the future was just really uncertain. It's still uncertain, but like it was especially, that early last year. And I've thankfully again like settled into a little bit more of a routine, and I'm now a lot more capable of working from home and I get a lot more done here. But that's also, again, because we've been doing this for so long now.
Right.
Yeah, it's a mess.
Now that you have a sort of routine set, what's a typical day like for you now? How are you balancing your creative life and your personal life in general?
Yeah, so I quit my day job in April of this year to pursue both writing and editing on a full-time basis. And that was a little bit ahead of my schedule of what I had planned. So it was a bit of a scramble initially to kind of line up some work for my editing side of things. I had a writing project that we had just, we've been working on that's on my plate, but I was like, I want to also have some editing things that I can work on, because you aren't writing every single day, like I really like alternating between them, so I'm not just hyper focused on one specific thing at a time. So typically though, when I left my day job, I decided that I wanted to keep that schedule still for the most part. So I work Monday to Friday, and I typically keep a 9 to 5-ish schedule, but I make sure that I start my day with a breakfast and coffee. I need so much coffee.
How many cups?
Well, I love lattes, so I'll either make a latte or like some coffee. I've recently gotten into doing like a French press, and it used to be probably like at least 2 cups, and now I've just gotten down to 1 cup. So I'm not a jittery mess that, has anxiety, but now I'm caffeinated.
So less finger guns.
Yeah, exactly. So I also try to make sure to incorporate getting up, doing yoga, stretching, just like taking care of myself more throughout my day, which was something that I was really guilty of not doing when I had a day job. making sure I have snacks, another thing I'm really guilty of. And yeah, I have right beside me, which obviously people can't see because they're only listening to this. I have a little whiteboard which has my schedule for the day, and I have like a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, which lays out based on what's on my agenda is Monday an editing day, is Tuesday a writing day, Wednesday edits, Thursday's maybe an admin day, Friday's another writing day. So I really loosely plan out my week. And then I have a to-do list where I write out and prioritize my projects. So when I get a bit overwhelmed, kind of with both a mix of ADHD and anxiety, I have a list that I can consult and then just be like, okay, Steph, you have a lot of emails, you have a lot of projects, but what's the priority? And I look over and it's there. And I'm like, great, this is on the list. And then it's really satisfying when I finish it and I can wipe it off my board. So that's kind of my process.
So you get that little dopamine hit.
Exactly. It's so good. And that was something that I really wanted to. I have an agenda too where I physically write everything down. So I have like my deadlines and, like my various kind of things that I have going on written in there. I also have like my calendar and my phone. I'm covering all of my bases basically. Like, the whiteboard, the agenda, the calendar, the Google Calendar. It's everywhere.
Have you always been that organized?
Yes and no. I think like I did my role before. I've done a lot of like executive assistant stuff. I've been like an office manager in my day job. So like those are all roles that require you to be pretty organized. Mm-hmm. And my anxiety makes me paranoid that I'll like forget things. So I'm a big list person. So it definitely kind of translates when doing work. It's like, oh, if I'm afraid I'm going to forget this thing, like, like picking up milk when I go to the grocery store, like it translates to all kind of parts of my life. Like I'm like, if I don't write it down, I'm afraid it'll just slip out of my mind. Mm-hmm. So it's like part organization and then part like just fear of like missing things. And I always want to do a good job and I always want to give whatever I'm doing 100%. And I just thrive in chaos and in doing the best job I possibly can, which kind of just in turn requires me making sure that I have all these kind of bases covered to remind me of things that are going on day to day.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool. Hearing you talk about all that stuff reminds me of, because I'm a graphic designer by trade, but at my last job I was also project manager. So balancing that sort of left-right thinking, I had a chance to really exercise both sides of my brain, and I find it fascinating that you're both an editor and a creator. So you exercise those parts of your brain all the time.
Yeah, and I don't know too if people always realize like just what goes into comic editing. Like you can be a story editor or a copy editor or whatever, but you're also sometimes like a project manager where you are, not just consulting and editing a script or an outline, but then you're handling and overseeing getting the art done. And that can be so many different stages from like thumbnails, pencils, inks, colors, letters. And you are making sure that all of those things line up with the script, that they're all married together in the best way possible. And then you're making sure that those files get to where they need to go and everyone's hitting their deadlines and chasing people. It's a really intensive process that I don't think everybody really fully comprehends. Mm-hmm. There's so many moving parts, and editing is like rewarding in a completely different way than writing. Like they're both incredible, and I'm so proud of all of the projects I've worked on in both writing and editing. But they scratch different itches for me. And it's, yeah, it's really interesting to kind of juggle both of those things. I never thought I would go into editing. I didn't think that was going to be something for my future. And I'm beyond surprised by how it's just taken me.
Speaking of like artwork and managing that aspect of projects, how do you go about finding illustrators to help bring, your stories to life?
Yeah. So it depends on the project. So I have an agent, and sometimes I will bring on people to a project before we pitch, but then sometimes I will pitch as a solo writer. So we have 2 books out on shelves now, which again are Oh My Gods, and then ParaNorthern and the Chaos Bunny Apocalypse. So those are really good examples of how it kind of goes. Like with Oh My Gods, I have a co-writer on that who's the amazing Insha Fitzpatrick, whom I love. And we originally were thinking we were going to pitch that to a comic market. So in the comic industry, in the comic market, you typically have to have the team established. Like, you've done everything yourself. You have a full pitch. You have preview pages. So meaning you have to have art and a letterer and a colorist and like the whole shebang. So originally I was looking for an artist on Twitter for a short story I was doing. And I put out this call, and Juliana Moon answered, and I looked at her portfolio and I messaged her, and I remember being like, okay, you are not what I'm looking for this short story. However, I would love to show your work to my co-creator, Insha, and maybe bring you on for this other project we have. So I showed Insha Juliana's work, and it was maybe a little bit like I sent Insha specific, like Insha really loves Rogue from X-Men and Harley and Ivy from Batman, Poison Ivy. And so Juliana had like a bunch of fan art of that. So I like specifically was like, Insha, look. And I sent her those things. And we could just both see that Juliana was a master of expressions and gestures and really could bring a character to life on the page. And we were in love with her. And we told her about the project, and she was in love with the project. And so she came on board for that. And we wound up, all of us, pitching the book through our agent, Maria. So that was an example of a book that we pre-formed and just sold as a team, a package deal. Whitney Gardner was later brought on by our publisher to do the colors for the book. And then with ParaNorthern, I pitched that as a solo writer. So I sent that in with my agent, and HMH Kids picked it up. And we didn't have an artist attached to the book. So we did a process of having a conversation about what I envisioned the story to look like, who were some of the dream artists I'd like to work with, and basically just figuring out a general kind of look and direction we wanted for the story. And then from there, kind of doing like between the dream list and then like digging up some other names of people that might be good fits. We eventually found Mari Costa, and we approached Mari for the project. And by we, I mean my editor did. I was not a part of that. Because I pitched solo as a writer, it was on the publisher's. It was the publisher's responsibility to hire the artist, so they handled that. But they approached Mari and made her an offer, and she came on board to illustrate the book. So they're very different processes depending on, again, what market you are aiming for, whether it's like the book market or the comics market or the industry specific. what the age kind of audience market is. So there's a number of factors, but usually it's, a mixed bag of things.
Speaking of ParaNorthern, I guess we'll go right into it. How long did it take for you to develop the story? And out of all the possible stories floating around in the creative ether, how did you come to actualize this particular one?
Oh my gosh. So ParaNorthern is my beautiful book child that has been in my head for years. I think I developed this story around probably in one of the worst years of my entire life. And I just like needed something to kind of work on and to focus on. And I started kind of coming up with this concept for something that was originally more aimed towards a YA market. And yeah, I just kind of kept at it in my spare time and was planning on doing it as a web comic eventually. I'd created it for Jen St. Ange, who's an amazing artist who at the time was a comic baby, and we were both kind of like, let's do a cool thing together. And Jen took off as an artist soon after that, and wasn't able to continue developing this, and gave me her blessing to carry on and just do it on my own. But yeah, I just kept working away at it, and eventually we had gotten some interest for Oh My Gods, and it was with a book market publisher, a book publisher. And they were like, we won't really be able to work with you unless you have an agent. So, like you should talk to some people and then we can resume this discussion. So I approached Maria Vicente and told her about what was going on, told her about Oh My Gods, asked if she would be into like representing it. And she kind of then was like, okay, I'd love to help you with this. Do you want me to represent just this project, or do you have other things that you would like me to represent? And I hadn't really told anybody about ParaNorthern yet. I anticipated Maria asking this, so I printed out all the information. But like again, that anxiety and the you're putting something that's been in your head for so long on paper and then telling somebody about it, and you have no idea how they're going to react to it. And it's a leap of faith. And so this was the first time I talked about the book, and Maria was just like, oh my gosh, I love this. I love this. And I was like, what? Really? And I just had no idea that this was something special. And the Oh My God stuff kind of quieted down, and the person that had been originally interested wasn't able to acquire it. And so we put ParaNorthern out on submission, and it wound up getting picked up like a couple weeks after we put it out. And I just hadn't realized that this would be a story that so many people would connect with like right away. And so, in addition to just being a really fun story that I loved to write and create, it was just really special to have that be the first thing we sold and to have that come to life. So again, I'd probably been formulating this story in like 2014, 2015. We sold it towards the end of 2018, and it came out July 13th, 2021.
Oh, wow.
So it's been a very long journey.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I love to talk. I'm so sorry. I don't have short answers for anything.
No, I love long answers. It shows more insight into what you're into.
But yeah, so it was a really long journey from start to finish. And then my same editor picked up Oh My Gods afterwards, and they fast-tracked Oh My Gods. And so Oh My Gods wound up being our debut book And then ParaNorthern came out. So even though ParaNorthern was bought first, it came out second.
It seems like ParaNorthern definitely took a journey, but I mean, how was the journey to finding a publisher like?
Yeah, that was like, so I had somebody who kind of interested in it, uh, like from before. I guess when I said my agent was the first person I kind of verbalized this, talked about this story with, that's not entirely true. I told another editor about it. And the editor was just kind of flip-flopping on it for a really long time and was like, maybe, maybe, maybe. So then again, I partnered up with Maria. We fancied up the pitch. And by we, I mean she did, because she's amazing. Um, she's so, so amazing. And yeah, we put it out on submission. So that kind of entails an agent going to all of the editors that they know take this sort of project, meaning a graphic novel, the age range, the whole shebang, and being like, what you think? And they give you, like responses and feedback based on the pitch and blah, 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 blah. So yeah, this went on pitch and I was like really anxious. And Maria, like when she gets a response, she fills in this like spreadsheet that explains like why they did or didn't like the pitch, or why they're, going to put in an offer or not put in an offer. So that if eventually you get all no's, you can refine the pitch and then resubmit it.
Oh, wow.
Based on that. But hopefully, somebody's going to want it. And in this case, within a relatively short period of time, my editor, Lily, whom I would take a bullet for, picked up ParaNorthern, and we had a call. And basically, before you kind of get the offer, you have like this call where they have feedback, and it's like, is this something you'd be willing to change? Is this in line with how you envision the book? And you have to make a call on whether it is or it isn't, like, is that how you want the book to be? Is it, is it all kind of a match, right? You're interviewing each other more or less. And Lily just is so insightful and has the best notes and knows story so well. And she just got the book, like she's like, here's who I envisioned for like the book. And it's just like this and this and this. Oh, and I could so picture Jen St. Ange. And I'm like, she was actually working on this. Like, like it's just this amazing feeling. And I really felt at home like right away with Lily. And so from there, it has to go to an acquisitions meeting where the publisher has to decide if they'll put money into the book and basically get it published. And yeah, so time kind of goes by again, and I was in a bookstore, this bookstore that had a lot of sentimental value to me too. And I got the call from my agent that was like, we have an offer on the book. And Lily at HMH had put in an offer, which had spiraled this other person who had been kind of interested into doing a counter offer. So we got a couple of offers for the book, and eventually settled on HMH Kids and Etch, which are now Clarion books. But yeah, that's kind of the, again, long version of the story. It's quite a process from start to finish, like getting a pitch in shape, and then getting it on submission, and then getting feedback and getting an editor to commit to it. It can be a really short process, or it can be a really long and grueling process. So it really just depends on the project.
Now, how were you feeling throughout that whole process? Were you confident? How was your anxiety level?
I feel like going into every day, I at least have a low grade level of anxiety at like the bare minimum.
Mm-hmm.
But on submission, I don't think it's possible to not be at a relatively high, medium to high level of anxiety. Like you're excited, especially in the first few days.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. And again, my agent does this wonderful thing where she has this live spreadsheet. So I can I don't have to email and be like, hey, are there any updates? Hello, are
That's
there
nice.
updates? Like she knows authors are anxious people. So she created this. Well, I don't know if she created this system. She uses this system to basically make sure we can stay in the loop without having to constantly email and flood each other's inboxes. So yeah, she puts out like all of the people that she pitches it to, and you see the feedback come in. And sometimes it's like, the feedback will be like really nice and it's like kind of deceiving because it's like, wow, I love this. Oh, such a good idea. Characters, amazing, blah, 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 blah. And then they'll be like, yeah, but then I didn't like the ending, so I'm going to pass. So you're never really fully prepared for kind of how tedious the feedback can be from time to time.
Right.
Which can be a little bit like heart-shattering. But you're hopeful, and you really just have to put faith in the fact that your agent is pitching it because they believe in it, and like an agent is putting in all this work. You're not paying them an hourly rate. They get paid on commission, right? So it's not in an agent's best interest to bring on somebody that is going to half-ass their way through, publishing and making new books and comics. And it's not in their best interest to help fine-tune a pitch that they don't believe in or they don't think will sell, right? Because then they're putting in all of this work that's going to amount to nothing.
Yeah, those are all good points.
So it's just hard to you have to keep that in perspective. You're just like, my agent believed in this, so we will find a home for it.
What is ParaNorthern about, and what kind of audience was it created for?
I love ParaNorthern. So ParaNorthern is about a group of 4 youngsters who are a witch, a wolf girl, a ghost, and a pumpkin head. And they accidentally open up a portal to another dimension that is filled with chaos bunnies. And the chaos bunnies come flooding into their world, into their town of North Haven, and start causing the ultimate destruction. They're kind of like Stitch from Lilo and Stitch. Not inherently evil, but, like very mischievous. So Abby especially is afraid that they're going to get in trouble for opening this portal, which is illegal, even though they didn't mean to. So they set out to find a way to get all of the bunnies back from whence they came, close this portal, and save their town from the apocalypse. So that is what it's about. And originally, I had envisioned it as kind of a teen YA adventure, but my editor asked if we could age it down to middle grade, and in retrospect, it's such a good fit. I love writing for that audience so much, and I'm so proud of how it came out.
Nice. And where can people purchase ParaNorthern?
Yeah, so fun tip for anybody making books: if you want an easy way to point people to where you've got your stuff, just buy a really cheap domain name and redirect it. So ParaNorthern.net will take you to my publisher's page with all of the information on the book and all of the places that you can buy it.
Nice. I'll definitely link to that. And I guess we'll take a little break and do a thunder round, which is our round of random questions. My first question is, what's one of your favorite words?
Oh, that's hard. What do I say a lot? Now I'm second guessing everything. Do people normally take this long to decide this?
It ranges.
I like saying spiffy a lot.
Spiffy? I like spiffy.
Yeah, it's just, a fun way to liven up a conversation. Spiffy.
What's something that you hated as a kid but love now as an adult?
like IKEA for one.
I don't even
You,
remember going to IKEA when I was a kid.
I remember going when I was like an like older kid, young teen, but not with my parents, but with my like friends' parents who would drive us to
I
Ottawa,
see.
which was like an hour and a half away, and they'd be like, "Time for IKEA," and I'd be like, I don't like this. Um, so I don't know, like I think those grown up things, like my parents got me um a really wonderful Christmas gift this year. They got me a washing machine, and I was like crying. I was like, this is the best gift ever. And, as a kid, you can never anticipate that that's going to be something that'll bring you like a ton of joy, like tear bringing joy as an adult.
Hmm.
Does that count?
Sure. It's 2 a.m. at your local karaoke joint, and they are getting ready to close. You get to sing the last song. What do you sing?
I mean, closing time is 2 on the nose for
Right, right,
this.
right.
Um, but I think one of my karaoke go-tos that I love to do is Semi-Charmed Life by Third Eye Blind.
Okay, that's a good one.
I don't know if it's like a closing song. It's maybe like more of a pump it up, but it's just like so fun, and it's the best song. It's the peppiest song about drugs, Like so good.
You're at a comic book shop and you're thumbing through the back issue bins. What kind of comics would you be looking for?
Ooh. Um
Archie? No, I'm just joking.
well, I mean, I I feel like my parents might have some of those still, actually, my old ones. Um, I don't know. I'm not like a big single issue collector. I'm more of a trade person
Me
just because like I
too.
don't have the
Yeah,
room for them.
exactly.
Um, yeah, I have some single issues that are, sentimental to me in a storage bin, but I don't know. I'm not a big single issue person. I do love like I do occasionally look for things like Brian Q. Miller's run on Batgirl because like they were really fun covers, and I really really loved that entire series. Um, but yeah, there's not a ton that I really would actively kind of seek out. I go to used bookstores
Yeah, okay.
and I'm looking for like old trades or things that are like out of print and I can't kind of get anywhere else. Um, I was like walking through my neighborhood the other day. I found like a bunch of comics that were on Kickstarter and you can't get anymore. And I was
Uh-huh.
like, what? On the curb. I was like,
What?
I'm gonna take this.
Kickstarter got kicked to the curb? What's going on?
Well, it was like it was oh my God, I can't remember the name of the book, but it was an Iron Circus book that got kickstarted, but it's like not available to purchase right
Hmm.
now, I don't think. But I was like, my friend had just been telling me about it, and then it miraculously showed up on this curb in my neighborhood. Um, so yeah, I'm more of like I want to find trades. I want to find graphic novels that I haven't read. Like my local used bookstore always has amazing deals on like middle grade and YA graphic novels, which I read
Hmm.
plenty of.
Hmm.
So yeah, again, a very long answer. I'm so sorry.
Oh, don't apologize. I love it. Um, what's something your fans would be surprised to know about you?
Oh, hmm. I think like I write like a lot of like fantasy and kind of like kid stuff. I really like action movies. Like I'm a big fan of like the Fast and the Furious franchise.
All right.
Like I love big epic movies like that, like Mission Impossibles too. Like I love all those movies. And yeah, I don't know. That's a tough one. I don't know like once you kind of get to know me, I think it's hard to be surprised by a lot of things about me, to be honest. Like, I kind of feel like I have a weird magnet. So things happen or I do things and people are just like, yeah, that tracks, you know? That's right.
Um, I've never been to Toronto, Canada. What are some of your favorite things about it?
Oh, I feel like when everybody I know from the US comes to Canada, the first thing they say, and I've heard this so many times is they're like, oh my gosh, it's like New York, but it's clean. It's so clean. I've heard that countless times. Um, I love when I go to new places, the thing I love is like walking around. I don't necessarily like museums. I don't necessarily like doing kind of touristy things. I really just like vibing with the city. But that being said, I really love Ripley's aquarium, the aquarium here. I think that's amazing. I love going there and just relaxing. Um, I think there are like some really amazing parks and views. There's a place called Riverdale Farm and Riverdale Park, and it has an amazing view of the city. Plus, there's like a really fun animal farm nearby, so you can like feed animals and hang out with them. And yeah, there's a lot of like really cool bookstores and little nice neighborhoods. BMV is my bookstore. There's three in Toronto, and that's like the used bookstore that I feel like you should go to. The big one, the biggest one has like 4 floors, like an entire floor of
Oh my gosh.
comics.
Wow.
And yeah, it has an entire floor of comics and sci-fi fantasy books, which is so very perfect for me. I just love combing through there forever.
Mm-hmm.
And the food, like you're doing yourself a disservice if you do like fast food and like, fancy fast food restaurants here, because there's so many authentic restaurants from people all over the world here. And you really need to try the food. There's great Ethiopian food. There's amazing Indian food, excellent Thai places. There's really like the gamut. And you need to experience that.
Wow. I definitely need to go to Toronto.
There's so many good things. If you ever do wind up here, hit me up. I will give you all the recommendations.
Definitely. Sounds like a plan. What's your favorite heist movie and why?
Oh my gosh. Well, okay, I'm currently very partial to this because I just watched it. We're recording a Capercast later today. The Great Muppet Caper is up there.
Okay.
Which is just like silly, but it just like makes me laugh so hard. But I also kind of spoiled this because I love the Fast and the Furious movies, but Fast 5 is amazing. And then like with the Brothers Bloom is really excellent also.
Cool. What's one thing on your bucket list that you have already accomplished and one thing still unchecked?
Ooh. So scuba diving with sharks,
Ooh.
I think was one of them. I think scuba diving more specifically.
Although you're in a cage though, right? You're not actually with the sharks.
I didn't do cage diving. I actually so it was only I got my like open water certification on a trip to Belize. So we just like did normal diving and by proxy like came across sharks. Not like big sharks. These were like, so I think there was some maybe like black-tipped reef sharks that were in like they were chasing a school of fish. So I got to swim with them and they were just like circling us. That was really cool. And then I was swimming and I felt something on the back of my leg and I thought it was one of the people in my group. And because like they just had like no self-awareness and would kind of bump you from time to time. And I was just like, oh, this is that person. And I turned around and it was a shark that was like swimming around my ankles, just like hanging out with me. And it was a nurse shark. Like, let's not, go bananas over this. But it just like came and like swam with me for like a while. And that was like really neat and really cool. And I'm a big fan of the ocean and all of the creatures in it. So that was very, very cool for me.
And what's one thing still unchecked?
Yeah. I mean, kind of similarly, I'd love to eventually kind of do a dive, like a cage dive, like with like great whites and see that sort of thing. But kind of ocean themed. I've done whale watching like in every city I've been to where that's like an option. I really, really love the ocean. In another life, I'm a marine biologist, I swear. But I want to see humpback whales like so badly. I've seen so many varieties of other whales, which were beautiful and majestic, and I love them. But like humpback whales are on my bucket list for sure. I want to see those like from my own eyes, and it hasn't happened yet. But I've seen orcas, I've seen gray whales, I've seen pilot whales and porpoises and dolphins, but no humpback whales.
Maybe one day.
Okay, someday.
If you could teach a class in college, what would it be?
Oh, funnily enough, this is actually a thing that I'm maybe doing.
Oh,
Um,
all right.
maybe. We'll not put that energy into the world yet. Maybe. But yeah, I mean, I really love talking about comics. I really love educating people about comics. It's genuinely amazing to me to help people better understand the world, the industry, and the process to making graphic novels and comics in general. So I think definitely the graphic novel process and about the industry is something I would eventually love to do.
That sounds like fun. I'm gonna have to enroll. Why do you keep getting caught in the rain?
Oh my God. Okay. This summer has been bananas here in Toronto. The rain has been so strange. We don't usually get this much rain. And I used one weather app for years, which was always like so reliable. And this summer I had to download a second weather app because I kept getting caught in the rain, and I'd like look at the app and it'd be like, rain won't start until 9 p.m. tonight. And I'm like sitting in a downpour.
I know that video that you shared. You were like so drenched.
I was like less than a block away from home.
Oh, wow.
You know, like I was maybe a 30-second run from where the rain started to my home. And I got so drenched. That was the second time too that week. Oh, it was so bad. So yeah, the rain is not usually this bad here. The weather apps are usually a lot more reliable, and climate change has kind of thrown that out the window.
If you could have a meal with anyone from history, who would it be with, and where would you eat at? And why did you pick this person?
Oh, this is a great question. Oh, I'm like a really big fan of Audrey Hepburn, and I would really love to pick her brain. Like she just not only is like this super charismatic, you know, elegant person, but just lived such a rich life and did so much and was so generous and so just kind and a beautiful person. And I would really deeply love to get to meet her. A friend of mine, Bob Ryer, who does another podcast, we've talked about this at length, Audrey specifically, and just what an amazing human being she seemed to have been. So, I mean, I think her. And then, I don't know, I think you could easily be like breakfast at Tiffany's, which is again very on the nose. But I'm like a cafe kind of person. Like I like just sitting down with somebody with a coffee and like a light snack and having that low key vibe where you can just connect with someone and not kind of have to worry about all this other kind of stuff going on. Like that's like my perfect kind of get to know someone place, a cafe.
Yeah, I like hanging out at cafes too.
Yeah. Just love the vibe.
Exactly. What's something new that you learned recently?
Oh, you were asking like great questions. What is something new I've learned recently? Oh my gosh, I'm trying to think of like all the things I've read on like Twitter and TikTok I'm like trying to get on TikTok and just fall down rabbit holes.
How
Uh,
has that discovery process been going?
it's okay. I'm trying to like, as somebody in her 30s, like I'm trying to not poo-poo it, like be like, oh, there's just so many youth on here. And I'm trying to embrace how fun it can be. Um, but I definitely feel my age when I use it.
Mm-hmm.
So that is definitely something that's made me feel old over the last little while. Something new that I've learned. Ha. Hmm. This is hard. Do people like normally blank when you ask some of these? Like,
Sometimes
hmm.
we can table it till a little bit later.
Yeah, let me think on that one.
Okay.
But I will think of something.
All right.
I will think of something.
What's the name of your cat and how did you meet?
Oh, thank you for bringing up my very best girl who is surprisingly not currently sitting beside me. So my cat is named Kaylee, and I was living on the East Coast in the middle of nowhere for a little while, and I had a cat at the time named Bella, and all of a sudden there was a cat at my door, like meowing and crying, and I opened it, and there was this kitten. She wasn't a kitten. She was about like 6 or 7 months at the time, kind of a kitten. And she was like starving and wanted in and clearly had been like loved by somebody. Like she was like litter trained. She was affectionate. She wasn't a feral cat, which you sometimes would see around the area. And so I let her in. I gave her some food. And she was clearly so skinny and hurting. But after she took a few bites and I was sitting down and watching her, she crawled up the steps, curled up into my lap, and then rolled over and started doing air paws, like little biscuits. And I was like, oh no, I think I have a new cat. But I did my due diligence and I asked around and made sure she wasn't missing, asked if anybody was missing this pet. But nobody claimed her. I took her to the vet and she had a broken leg. One of her teeth was, one of her canines was broken. And there was a few other things kind of going on. And the vet said that she'd either been like hit by a car or thrown from a car.
Oh my gosh.
So my other cat did not enjoy this other cat being here, but we got her all fixed up. And originally she was going to go live with my parents. They were gonna pick her up and keep her. But somewhere along the way, we really bonded, and my mom was like, the best pet is the one that chooses you. And I couldn't get rid of her. Like, she was just like, it sounds, again, I keep on saying like really cliche things, but like we really just like had this connection. And my other cat was really young, and shortly after this, she would very suddenly die. And I was really, heartbroken by that. But Kaylee helped me through that. And I think in a weird way, she was sent to me to kind of get me through this awful time and to be there for me. So, yeah, she's my little sweet baby.
If a movie was made about your life, what kind of music would be on the soundtrack?
Oh, I feel like, music is like my first like love. Like my dad was like at a young age was like, we're going to teach you about music. And, we're going to teach you how to handle vinyl. We're going to teach you how to like use CDs properly. We're going to teach you about like the music. And so I've had this like deep love of all things music for all of my life. But that being said, I feel like I'm a big like alternative kind of like indie rock kind of person. But I'm obsessed also with the idea of writing musicals. So if somebody did a movie, I would kind of hope that it would be like a full-fledged musical. Like I love the idea of that being how you would present my life to the world. Like, I just think that's really fun. So, yeah, that's my answer.
Is there a musical that you like to watch?
Oh, yeah, so many. I mean, I really love Moulin Rouge. Like, Moulin Rouge is one of my all-time favorites.
Uh-huh.
And then someday I will write Pacific Rim the musical,
Oh my
and
gosh.
it will be my favorite. And even though I wrote it, I'm gonna love it forever because I'm willing it into existence, Guillermo del Toro. So when that happens, I'll change my decision. But until then, Moulin Rouge.
How does it feel? How does it make you feel when kids tell you how much they enjoy your books?
Oh my gosh. Nobody really prepares you for that. You know, like people are just like, oh, writing for kids is the best. I got a handwritten letter like a few months ago from a kid, and her parents like messaged me and were like, I'm really sorry. We asked if we could take a photo of the letter, but like she really wants to mail it. Is it okay if we mail it to you? And I was like, yeah, of course. And you get this letter and nothing prepares you for how special it is. Like this kid, Mila, drew all the characters. She was writing about, oh my God, specifically. She drew them all and wrote this amazing, sweet letter about all the things she loved about it, about how she's sharing it with her friends. And I'm just like, oh, this is so wholesome and good. And then she wrote like 3 PSs, and the second PS was like, could you make it into a movie and can I be in it? And I was like, what a flex. I love that for you. I love that for you. And then I did a Q&A last week with a kids book club, and that was like, I just wanted to cry the whole time, like in the best possible way, because like they're just so sweet. Everything they ask is so earnest and just, you know, like they're excited, and you don't get that with adult audience. Like people like your work and they're like, wow, great work. This is amazing. This is my favorite issue of all time. But like kids put their whole hearts, their whole selves into asking this question. They're like waving their arms around and being like, wow, this was like the greatest thing ever, you know, and just, it is so special. And we did an outdoor signing because Toronto's still, you know, pandemic-y, as is much of the world. But we did a launch for ParaNorthern, and a kid had already bought the book and came to get it signed. And it just, you know, made everything amazing. It made my whole day. It's kids don't realize, like, they're just telling you, like, they're so excited to talk to you. They're so excited to interact with you. And maybe it's a moment that they remember, maybe it's not. But it's something that all of these moments, I will never forget them. They are like embedded in my soul, you know?
Yeah.
Ugh. Now I'm getting like emotional thinking about it. But
All right. What's something new that you learned recently?
Oh no! I was so distracted. I don't know still.
That's okay. We can move on. I'll ask you on the next podcast we have together.
Okay. I will think about it. It's funny because like I love learning like new random facts all the time. But I just, yeah, I don't think that I know anything new. That's not, I can't think of anything new.
It's all good. The next part of the podcast is superhero shoutouts. Is there a person or a group of people that has helped you along the way that you'd like to say thank you to?
Oh, well, I think they know because I constantly tell them.
Mm-hmm.
But again, Lily from HMH like changed my life by taking a risk on me. You know, like when you're a debut author, they don't know how you're going to do or like what kind of audience you'll get. And my agent, Maria, for taking me on in the first place and championing. There we go. My projects, you know, like it's just so amazing. But I think my friends, I've had to bail on so many things over the last few years because I was working a full-time job and juggling writing and editing, which were also kind of full-time jobs too. And so my friends, I didn't wind up doing a lot with them, but they always invited me to things. They always made me feel like I was still part of the group and never left out. And those kind of friends are just, one in a million that just make sure that you're included, even when you are the Bailey flaky friend that cancels on things all the time. Like you have people in your corner that are like, it doesn't matter. I love you anyways. Like, ugh, my friends are superheroes, truly.
Is there an artist or writer or other creator that you'd like our audience to check out?
Yeah. Whitney Gardner, who is my co-host on Capercast, just had a book come out called Long Distance. And she has another book called Fake Blood, which I love so much. It's about like a boy meets girl, and like boy realizes the girl's into like vampires and then decides to pretend to be a vampire. But then he realizes that she's actually into vampire hunting. Mm. It's just like so fun, and she's such a good writer and creator and artist, and I love her. Also, Dave Sheet has a book coming out with Miranda Harmon called Mayor Goodboy from Random House, and that's out in August, and it is a delight. It's for a younger middle grade audience, but it's so much fun, and it's about a mayor who is a dog. And so, yeah, Dave has been amazing. Miranda is an amazing artist. So those are my shout outs.
Cool. Did we miss anything? Are there any other projects you'd like to promote? What other projects have you been involved with that you'd like our audience to know about? I know we talked about ParaNorthern, but is there anything about Oh My Gods that you'd like to expand upon?
Oh, well, I mean, again, Oh My Gods was such a fun project to work on, is such a fun project to work on. The first book came out. Now the second book is out next year. Again, ohmygods.org will take you to all the information for it. Again, I do the Capercast with Whitney Gardner. Capercast.com will take you to that.
Nice.
I am a big fan of domain names.
That's smart.
Right. And what else do I do? Oh, I also, again, I spoke about education and like graphic novels and kind of being a fan of helping people whenever possible in that area. So I run a website that's tools and resources for creators called Creator Resource. It has articles, it has templates like timeline templates and contract templates and that sort of thing. Plus like page rate info and all kinds of other stuff that can help people better navigate the comic book industry as a creator or better just understand it. So that's creatorresource.com. And yeah, those are a few of the things that I've got going on.
Awesome. And if our audience wanted to follow you on social media, what are some of the best places to connect with you?
So I'm probably most active on Twitter and Instagram at Hello Cookie. But you can find everything pertaining to me and more at stephaniecooke.ca. I'm, again, trying to get on TikTok more and be there. I'm doing like a series of how to break into comics and talking about the comics industry over there. So it's Hello Cookie, but the O's are in cookie are replaced with zeros because there are billions of people on that app and every username is taken. So
what are some of your favorite cookies?
Oh, this is a question. I love a ginger molasses cookie.
Oh my gosh. I never had that.
Oh my gosh. It's like a ginger snap cookie, but it's like bigger and they're like really chewy and delicious. And they sprinkle those like, that like granular sugar on it, like those big sugar. Oh, it's so good. Every time I go to the bakery and they have them, I can't resist getting at least
now,
one.
is that a regional cookie in your area or is it?
I don't think so. It might be. Like, it's not a cookie that you would see at like every bakery, I don't think. And
Mm-hmm.
like some are better than others, but one of my local bakeries does a fantastic one. It's just like so, so good. It's similar to like a ginger cookie, I
Mm-hmm.
think, but uh slightly different. It's not as sweet, I don't think.
I see.
But then speaking of sweet, I really, really love a sugar cookie. Like I am such a fan of just a plain old sugar cookie with like royal icing. Just
Mm.
so good. I'm a cookie connoisseur.
Cool. And before I let you go, I usually like to ask my guests about, you know, pieces of advice that you can give to our audience. Seeing as how you recently quit your day job to make comics full time, why did you feel the timing was right to do so? And what kind of advice would you give to someone that is struggling to give their creative side a chance to flourish, but still working that full time job?
Yeah. So, I mean, I really would genuinely recommend having a day job for as long as possible. You know, the creative industry is really hard on you, and it's hard to break in, it's hard to find steady work, it's hard to make a living wage. And I'm not trying to scare anyone out of the industry or from doing it or pursuing it, but you have to be really realistic when going into it. And my plan originally was to hopefully pay out my advances so that I would start earning royalties and have a passive income coming in through that first before I quit my job. However, uh, the what I was getting paid at my day job and the mental energy it was taking up in my day and what I was being asked to do wasn't equaling out to be worth it for me. So I made the really tough decision of advancing my plans and taking a leap of faith into doing this all full time. Um, so it's not that it was right necessarily, but my hand was forced a little bit. But before I quit, I had calls with my editors, my agent, and told them what was going on, and we made a game plan. So if you're going to take that leap of faith, I would just make sure that you are really prepared. You've thought, it through, you have work lined up and, that sort of thing. And just so you have all your bases covered. I did a lot of paranoia prep, is what I will call it, before I went through with it. But that being said, it's hard to juggle a day job. It's hard to juggle also wanting to do creative projects, especially if you have a job that really sucks away your energy. I would write on breaks. I would write after work. I would write on the weekends. And my partner and I, again, would sit in the library. And our entire weekend sometimes would just be working on writing stuff, but together. And then we'd get like a nice dinner, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So you really kind of have to be ready to kind of make some sacrifices to things like your social life and, prioritize what your soul kind of needs to thrive. Like I needed to write. It was something that I couldn't not do. I was miserable if I wasn't working on stuff. So thankfully my partner also likes working on creative projects, so that worked out for me. But like I said earlier, like I didn't really have a lot of social time with like my friends. I gave up a lot of that for a long time, and that can be really tough for people. And I'm not saying that you should isolate yourself or whatever, but juggling all of these things, it takes there's a balance to it. And you have to find that balance. So I will say, don't rush yourself. Give yourself time. You are not on a schedule unless you genuinely have a deadline. Like you don't, be kind to yourself. Allow yourself to take a year or 2 years or whatever to write whatever you're working on or to work on whatever you're working on. And allow yourself breaks, allow yourself time to breathe, allow yourself, you know, whatever it takes, because you aren't going to create the best work possible if you are constantly just killing yourself to pay the bills and to push creative things out into the world. So be kind to yourself. And I think the biggest piece of advice I can offer to anybody who's juggling all of those things is whatever project you're working on, make sure it's one that you are the biggest fan of. Work on the things that make you happy, that you're passionate about. Don't worry about commercial success. Don't worry about whether this will be a smash hit. Write it for you. Write it because you love it and you can't do anything until it's down on paper. And that way you always come back to it and you always want to kind of put time in on it.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
My last question is, you found your voice in children's and YA comics. Do you have any advice to help somebody find their voice in a particular genre or market?
Yes, I super do. I have opinions on everything. I really am. I started actually in short stories. So I started submitting to anthologies, and I practiced by, being like, wow, this is an anthology, space westerns. Never thought I'd write that. Let's do it. There's a lot of anthologies out there right now that have been really popularized, and they're a great way to break into the industry. But more so than that, they're a really great way to figure out your voice, to get in a wide variety of writing experience on a number of different genres. Short stories are also notoriously hard to do, so building up a portfolio of those really highlights what you can do to an editor that might be hiring. And yeah, short stories are such a great way to learn about your voice. Like, I started by writing a story about my Oma in the Toronto Comics Anthology, and that's so different. It was a very, not dark story, but just a very different story than what I do now. And I recently did a Kickstarter for a series of short stories, and they're all silent comics, and they're like Avatar meets Planet Earth.
Oh, wow.
I'm really proud of them. Megan Huang did the art on that. They're called Life. But there's just so much you can do with short stories. Short stories, again, are notoriously hard to do. So if you can practice those and get good at those, it really is a great way to show editors what you've got. And don't be deterred if an anthology rejects you a few times. I got rejected a ton of times before I eventually found my way in and started building my portfolio. But that's how I broke into both writing and editing. So short stories, you can check out Anthology Comics on Twitter. That's open submissions to anthologies and zines and stuff. And I also run a site called Creator Advisor, which is a sister site. And I post up job opportunities on there for creators.
Awesome. Well, Stephanie, it's been a pleasure getting to know you. I feel like I can probably talk to you for another couple hours.
I can talk forever. I know. I warned you, but it's like experiencing is different, right? No
worries. I mean, a lot of our earlier podcasts were well over 3 hours long. So.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, it's been a pleasure, and I look forward to our next conversation. Is there anything else that you'd like to say before I let you go?
Next time, I will come equipped with a bunch of things that I've learned. It'll be an educational podcast smorgasbord.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening to the Hall H Show podcast. And thanks to my guests once again, Stephanie Cooke. Please give her a follow and check out her graphic novels, Oh My Gods and ParaNorthern. And also check out our podcast, The Capercast. As you know, we love putting the spotlight on independent pop culture creatives like Stephanie. If you have suggestions for a potential guest, please let us know by reaching out to us on social media or by filling out our contact form on our website, hallh.com. If you believe in our mission to be the voice of independent creators, we would appreciate a rating, hopefully 5 stars, and a comment on Apple Podcasts. And please spread the word on social media using the hashtag HallHShow. Peace, cheers, and stay safe out there.